Hello everyone, Lee Fried here, and today I'm actually on vacation, but I had a little extra time and I just finished reading a book on the plane in my hotel room, and I thought, well, I just couldn't keep myself away and I had to do a review of it. So here I am in my hotel room, and today we're looking at The Fourth Industrial Revolution by Klaus Schwab. Or as he would say, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So if you're not familiar with who Klaus Schwab is, he is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum based in Davos, Switzerland. And so Mr. Schwab has been seen in YouTube clips talking about, the kind of the new world order, or the new future that is emerging in business and technology. And so they're at the center of this mysterious economic one of these world NATO United Nations-esque organizations based in Switzerland, and he's been something of a icon for his a slightly dystopian concerning terms and predictions for the future. And so I think his most famous one is the World Economic Forum. I'm not sure if he said it specifically, but he's the founder and chairman. So everything that comes out of the WEF, we assume he's greenlighted it. But the most famous thing is that you will own nothing and be happy. That everything will become a rental economy. You will not own property or whatever. It will be owned by the elites essentially, and everyone else from the poor to the middle class to even the higher middle class will be essentially just slaves or poor. Or that's the thing they spin it as whatever. And it's funny because after reading this book, it seems to be Schwab obviously, or they say is a representative of these ideas, but the point of this book and the point of what Schwab is trying to do with the WF is have a positive narrative for the future, that people don't have crazy dystopian conspiracy theories like they do. So it's kind of funny and sad if what Mr. Schwab says in his book is genuine. It's very sad because his presence on social media has had the exact opposite effect, like completely wrong. But anyway, it's kind of like, what does he really think? Did he really, write this book? It's a very short book, and so my initial impression from this, it's a very short book, and it's very general. It's very surface level. He gets into a few details here and there, but a lot of it is like, we need to have industry and capital and technology work together and harmonize and synergize and create a better future where we empower the individual and even the common man, and all this other stuff is like, okay, yeah, this all sounds good. I'm on board. It's all like, we have to do our best. But and in a way, I mean, maybe you could blame him for being like a policymaker and not very creative, but it's not a terribly well written book. I mean, it does have studies in it and stuff, but it's very kind of surface level. It's like, very idealistic. We all have to work together and, pull up our bootstraps and find ways to solve problems and have synergy and cohesion and meet with world leaders and make deals. And it's like, that's what we already do. I mean, that's what we're kind of already doing. So maybe he's just an out of touch United Nations power structure guy that doesn't have actually influence over anything, and he's just saying the general idealistic things, and he has a bunch of trust fund money, and he's doing this thing. I don't know. I really don't know after reading this, because it's so if we just take this at face value, it's very much about what is the future going to look like. And, it kind of is good that it's short and kind of simple, because it is not super complicated. one of the main things he talked about is, I might be phrasing this different, but like synergy technologies. And he said, the real revolutions are not going to happen until you actually see a confluence or a synergy of different technologies. Like you have robotics and AI, and they're kind of in their own silos. They're on their own racetracks, rather, and they're racing. And suddenly they realize, oh wait, we can cross over, we can converge, and suddenly AI and robotics leads to a whole revolution in, I don't know, the service industry, for example. Could we have robots that are actually servers? That's probably still very far off. It's not something he says. That's something I'm just making up. You're going to have genetic engineering and quantum computing. What's that going to look like? And so he goes through all the possibilities of these different technologies. I should actually slow down and first address the fourth industrial revolution. I still think many people don't know what the fourth one is. Like, what are we talking about? So when he starts his book, he talks about the first real revolution that you could point to in history that really, in the way we talk about what a revolution is it's a reset. It's a new chapter where we start a new kind of a new standard, a new norm, and then that goes until we reach a new standard, and then we do that, and so on. And he says the first real revolution socially, not industrial revolution, the first social revolution was the emergence of agriculture, the agrarian society from hunter-gatherers who would be more nomadic. People started to settle down, develop irrigation systems, and figure, I can grow way more food and be sustainable and predictable rather than traveling and hunting and so on. So that's like one example of what a social revolution is that, okay, the rules are totally changed. We're no longer living in yurts. We're actually staying in one place, and we have the concept of something like a home, which is, interesting, right? So what are the first three industrial revolutions? Well, he kind of goes into it. I'll try to remember what he said here. But the first industrial revolution was steam energy, the steam engine and steam-powered machines, which is roughly in the late 1700s. And that revolutionized, technology, travel, transport. Suddenly, we had this new form of energy, steam energy and coal to power and construct and change our life. And a symptom of that, I think, is a level of urbanization. And it's funny if you kind of connect this. He doesn't connect this, but I'm connecting it to the original social evolution. Is that with the move to an agrarian lifestyle, suddenly you have the concept of a home, and that's really the first rural lifestyle. But it also, from a nomadic perspective, that's urbanization. You're suddenly creating this grouping of people in a more condensed space in a different system. And it's interesting that I think every industrial revolution results in the same thing. You have increased urbanization, if you can call it that, or collectivization. So the first industrial revolution was steam energy. The second industrial revolution was the assembly plants and sort of the assembly lines and the machining and sort of optimizing it into factories. And that was from the early, I think you said 1820, for about roughly 100 and so years. So when we started getting factories, mass production, the Luddites, the anti-technologists that were in response to that, that was the second industrial revolution. And you had people started living more in the city because of this. And the third industrial revolution, according to him, is the 1960s with the emergence of computerization, computers, the fact that we now have digital I'm sorry, I think I might be wrong on that. I mean, there's digital, no, that's right. So digital computers, the fact that we can now process information inside these machines and they can hold information, and how the cost of that especially went down, and how now we have entire monolith companies like YouTube and Google and Apple and Amazon that are all more or less based around this digital framework. And so that's the first three. And so what is the fourth industrial revolution? So he's kind of saying like, yeah, not everyone's going to agree with this, but he says he thinks that with the advent of AI, quantum computing, and all these other technologies, that they are so vastly different that they're not just new digital technologies, they're digital technologies that are going to bleed into the real physical world with things like AR and VR, that this really is going to change society a lot with these technologies. And I think the main thing is the obsoletization of jobs, of traditional jobs, and a higher urban concentration. And so this is like the conflict that I have and other people have, that is Klaus Schwab saying this is going to happen and I'm, controlling all the things, or I'm representing someone who's controlling all the levers, that this is what we want to do? Or is he saying, look, I'm just looking at the patterns, I'm looking at the trends, I'm saying this is probably what's going to happen. I don't want it to happen, but this is what it looks like. So it's hard to appraise the intent of the author and the structures at work. But regardless, it is happening. So it's good to educate ourselves about it. Another big takeaway that I did enjoy from this book that I don't think was covered is, in every industrial revolution, you have a new power technology that obsoletes and specifically uses the term disruption. You have disruptors like eBay for the flea market. You have the Ford Model T for the horse and buggy. You have these disruptive technologies that aren't just, we're a new industry, but we're replacing an old industry, and suddenly all those people are out of jobs. And so he says the main critical factor is, because when those jobs are lost, there's new problems with the new technology. There always is. And so his point is, it's not so much it is. It's not as if the new jobs will come. It's how fast will the new jobs come, and how fast can we fill that skill gap between the old jobs and the new jobs and people getting onboarded. Because to have people sort of, they've learned their whole life, they've been a steel mill guy or they've been a horse and buggy guy hitching things, and suddenly at one point that's all over and they have to transition. And he said what the critical factor is the time frame between the old skill and the new skill and filling that gap. And I mean, that's right. It sounds right to me. Sorry. So yeah, he says the second industrial revolution was actually electrical power. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. That actually makes more sense. So you have steam, electricity, and digital. So those are the three. And the fourth one is going to be AI, basically. That you're just going to have this insane exponential growth in technology and in wealth. And yeah, he says again and again, it's about creating the right narrative, which again has been the opposite thing of what I've seen on social media. But he wants to make a positive narrative about embracing this new technology. And he is right to an extent. With or without people's consent, this technology will come and it will change the world. And we can't just be Luddites about it. We can't. And for those of you who don't know, it's an interesting story about Robert Ludd. Real guy. I mean, Luddite, you think this is some weird. No. Robert Ludd was a guy in England, and if I remember correctly, he and his family, whatever, were seamstressers or stresses, and so they would have the loom or whatever, and you would do that back and forth, the thing you see in the old movies, and they would make fabric out of that by weaving together threads and rope and things like that. And of course, in the middle 1800s, they had a machine that was able to do that process. You're just moving something back and forth, creating a weave, a piece of fabric. And so that completely replaced him, his whole family's business. And he was famous because he went into the factories and he literally destroyed the machines and had an anti-technology rebellion. I don't know what happened to him. Probably went to jail. Maybe he died. I don't know. But that's where the term comes from. It's actually made based after one guy, Robert Ludd, who said, "No, not taking this. I'm gonna destroy the machines." But unfortunately, that did not have impact on technology and progress. So regardless, we do have to be able to work with it and find our own angle and find a way to manipulate it for our own benefits. He also talks about the current state of technological companies today that compared to the auto industry, I think, yeah, this is interesting. I read this to you. So Detroit in 1990 versus Silicon Valley in 2014. 1990, the three biggest companies in Detroit had the combined market capital of $36 billion, with revenues of $250 billion and 1 million employees. In 2014, Silicon Valley had a combined capital of $1 trillion, generated by the same revenues, $247 billion, with about 10 times fewer employees, just about 137,000. So the profit margins, at least for, if you're comparing the really big players in auto, which is physical, versus Silicon Valley, which is digital, the revenues are the same, the profit is way more, and the employees are way less. And that's kind of the trend that he sees continuing in the future. And he says that is an obvious form of inequality, that there's going to be more inequality, whether we want it or not. And it's not just going to be between, in the North American market, but it's also going to be in, the third world. And he talks about the adoption of industrial technology in the third world. He said the spindle, which was the symbol of the first the first industrial revolution of weaving, I think, didn't reach, the third world until 120 years after its invention. And so he talks about things like, about, I don't want to quote these without looking at the stats directly, but most of the world, there's still a lot of the world that's not on the internet, that doesn't have access to high speed internet alone. People who don't use social media, people who don't even have access to computers, people who still live in basically the dark ages. It's we want to make it an opportunity for everyone, and talks about megatrends. So yeah, here are some of the things that he sees, converging, things like autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, advanced robotics, new types of industrial materials and synthetic compounds, such as graphene, which is about 200 times stronger than steel, 1 million times thinner than the human hair, and an efficient conductor of heat and electricity. So nanotechnology, that's one thing. I talked about blockchain, and so this is actually good. The way he describes blockchain is in 2 words. Essentially, that is a distributed ledger. It's the fact that the blockchain technology, which doesn't have to be Bitcoin, it doesn't have to be anything, it has to be a digital asset that is basically sent over this technology like a digital telephone pole that is so secure that if I were to send you something, like a digital footprint or whatever, I can tell that you own it, I sent it, and that we don't need a middleman. I just send it directly to you via this technology, and it's super secure because of all the computational power involved in ensuring the ID of this item, which I think is just a very clear way to explain it. Out of all the people who've tried to explain blockchain and Bitcoin to me, that was actually the best explanation. So thank you, Mr. Schwab. Yeah, he says, this is a great quote, March 2015 from a TechCrunch article, Uber is the world's first largest taxi company with no vehicles. Facebook, the world's most popular media owner, creates no content. Alibaba, the most valuable retailer, has no inventory. And Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. And so this is where the idea of you own nothing and you will be happy comes from. It's that everything, this is the gig economy or the share economy, where you are able to facilitate the use or service of a product or a service or whatever at the right time for the right price. and it's a more dynamic system based on dynamic need and need and supply, demand and supply than before. It's like, hey, I need this now, and I need it for cheaper, and you can actually get it because of the system that is in place. And he says, and so to his point, you don't. There are certain things you don't need to own, but then there are certain things we do want to own, and we don't want that taken away from us. And so it is difficult to trust or wrap our head around this, where it's like that is kind of what the future looks like. If I want to go on vacation, I might not go to a hotel, I'll go to an Airbnb. I don't need to pay the full price of something and own it if I'm just going to go wherever. And the cost value benefits of where this is going to shift and change for everything from groceries to healthcare to whatever. He talks about the Human Genome Project. That took 10 years. So the first time they did it, to fully code a strand of DNA, it took 10 years, $2.7 billion. Today, a genome can be sequenced in a few hours for less than $1,000. So just the progress to do things cheaper, better, faster is happening. We've cracked some kind of code, and we just keep going forward. He says, so there are a few things here that we know. Okay, we've heard about self-driving cars, we've heard about, electric vehicles, electric self-driving vehicles, autonomous drones and things like that. But there are some few things in here that, it's 2024 right now, that are not yet top of mind, but like, oh yeah, that is technically possible. One thing, for example, is bioprinting. The idea that, genome coding, 3D printing are to converge, and you'll have things where you'll be able to print a liver or a heart or whatever organ you need to replace, and you won't have to get a transplant. You can get a synthetic thing, which is probably still far away, which is why we don't hear about it. It's not trustworthy. They're already talking about synthetic meat made from like cell cultures, which it looks very unappetizing. So there's one idea there. And then of course he talks about, the privacy of, your genome and all this other stuff and all, very good logical things. So he has some predictions for 2025, which is a year away from now. 10% of people will have clothing connected to the internet. I forgot, Internet of Things is going to totally explode. First robotic pharmacist in the US. 10% of reading glasses will have connection to the internet. 80% of people worldwide will have a digital presence on the internet. First 3D printed car in production. 5% of consumers printed in consumer products printed in 3D. Sorry, this list just goes on and on. The first city with more than 50,000 people with no traffic lights, 10% of a country's GDP due to blockchain technology or stored on blockchain technology, and first AI machine on a corporate board of directors. In fact, I've already seen that happen. It's been a funny little experiment, some Vice or some documentary thing where they had a AI bot on the board of directors. It seemed like they didn't really take it seriously. It was more like a consultant kind of thing, but He also talks about global GDP growth. In the few years before 2008, global economy was growing about 5% per year. And if it continued, the global GDP would double every 14 to 15 years, with more and more people lifted out of poverty. However, in the aftermath of the Great Recession, which is like what they call the 2008 crisis, it slumped to about 3 to 3.5 per year for the global economy. And so there is this secular stagnation, and all the economists are like, oh, we don't know what's going on. It could decline further, and he said, if it went down to 2%, that would mean it would take 36 years for global GDP to double. So he does recognize the current situation that global GDP actually is growing, but it's not growing as much as it used to. This is interesting. He talks about aging, and he says that aging populations are seen as a specifically Western phenomena, but he says it's actually a more worldwide prevalent. Not only in Europe, where the decline began, but it's also being seen now in South America, the Caribbean, and much of Asia, definitely including China and southern India. Even some countries in the Middle East, like North Africa, and Middle East and North Africa, such as Lebanon, Morocco, and Iran. So the birth rates, a declining birth rate seems to be slowly moving around as well, which might be connected to global GDP. He also points out, in the U.S., at the beginning of the 19th century, people working in agriculture and the land consist about 90% of the workforce. But today, this accounts for less than 2%. So, I mean, that's kind of crazy, but I guess it makes sense that you have this massive urbanization. Went from 90% rural to 2%, which is just crazy. I mean, you could say that's a population boom. So maybe the population's more or less stayed, and there was just a population boom in the cities, which could be possible. He also has these funny words like techno-pessimists and techno-opportunists, people who want to take advantage of the future, and people who want to have narratives that are either optimistic or negative about the future. So here's actually a really cool graph in the book. And I think this is a big takeaway, the jobs that are most prone to automation and the jobs least prone to automation. So most prone to be automated are things like telemarketers, tax preparers, insurance appraisers, referees, legal secretaries, hosts and hostesses at restaurants, coffee shops, real estate brokers, farm labor contractors, secretaries and assistants, and couriers and messengers. Least prone are things like mental health and social workers, choreographers, physicians and surgeons, psychologists, human resource. Sadly, we have to keep them around, sadly. Computer systems analysts, anthropologists, marine engineers, sales managers, and chief executives. So, hey, chief executives are happy. Like, hey, all right. I don't know. So there's a mixture of good and bad in there. You might have to say goodbye to the Starbucks barista, the cute Starbucks barista. I know, it's very sad. Yeah, I mean, so there's things in here which are obvious things that we don't think about, but I think that's a good summary of kind of, that is practical and relevant, I think, to the people reading the book. He says, there's also the problem with misinformation. Christian Hammond, co-founder of Narrative Science, a company specializing in automation narrative generation, forecasts that by the mid-2020s, 90% of news could be generated by an algorithm, most of which without any kind of human intervention. So articles, news, the things that you see that enrages you or gets your interest, apparently machines are also coming to replace that. So I guess things like BuzzFeed and the Wall Street Journal might be, in trouble. So yeah, it's kind of, there's a whole slew of things, but it's basically things that are monotonous and repetitive seem to be going away, and things that we have to do the same thing over and over and over again, but things that are more dynamic and agile and different seem to be staying. So if you are a computer scientist, like, hey, what's the problem here? What's the problem now? If your problem changes from day to day and you need to be adaptable, it seems like that is going to stay. If it's digital, if it's more of a physical job, then you're going to keep on to that. Then he talks about, the gender gap. I hate when they say gender and not sex because it's more direct, but he's like, women around the world are going to be disempowered. And yeah, actually, so I was kind of joking about the cute Starbucks thing. But yeah, Starbucks like the hostesses, Starbucks people, secretaries. A lot of these, he points out, are female jobs. So he says that females will have less job opportunities worldwide. And he says that's a problem with gender equality and all that stuff. So there's a slight, stance there. Yeah, and he's saying we need to maybe invent new jobs to cater to that group, and any group that is displaced by these new technologies. Yeah, making sure that groups are not left behind is a moral imperative, a critical goal that could be mitigate the risk of global instability, uprising, social instability. He says, if you have a bunch of people that are suddenly without job, without purpose, without direction, they will possibly get destructive. And he says that's why government needs to work with technology and all these other industries to mitigate that, because it's in their best interest. A fraction of the workforce will be the gig economy. There will be people who will be in the morning an Uber driver, then an Instacart shopper in the afternoon, and then an Airbnb host in the evening, and TaskRabbit and all these other things. But that's not going to be for everyone, essentially. Talks about big data and actually aggregating patterns and usage and insights from it that drive decision-making things. Do people buy this specific product on Amazon on a Wednesday at 6 p.m. consistently? Why? Let's find out and let's make use of that. He says, this is interesting, Google's decision to reorganize into a holding company called Alphabet is a vivid example of the trend to sustain its innovative character and maintain its agility. Essentially that they wanted to create, they were getting too big essentially. They said they wanted to create Alphabet as kind of like the mother company and create these small firms that do have the innovative and engaging character that drive innovation and productivity. Otherwise, they become like the big behemoths who just sit back and do nothing all day, and they just rest on their laurels essentially. So that's another thing that he advises big tech to do, to keep or to create small innovative centers as like child companies. He does say that regardless, it's going to be empower citizens to voice their opinions, but it will also reduce privacy in that there'll be new surveillance technologies, which could empower tyrannical governments. According to the innovation charity Nesta in the UK, the most innovative cities for startups are New York, London, Helsinki, Barcelona, and Amsterdam. It's funny, actually. This is interesting about hacking and cybersecurity. He says, hacking is when you break in and then you change something. But there's also something that we learned called cracking, which is just you break in, you don't touch anything though. And so he kind of brings up a good point. I'm not a cybersecurity guy, but that the rules and framework of the cybersecurity future, he says we don't even have the right language or understanding to what constitutes an attack. If you just break in and don't change anything, should you be heavily persecuted for that? If you go in and you just get aggregate information and you download information, is that an attack? If you go in and you actually change something in a positive way, well, obviously it's going to be that's a total, but still a breach. So it's interesting that he does recognize that not only do we not know what might constitute an attack or a malicious intent, but also what is the correct response to that. And that's still being, I guess, probably played out and created right now. And he does, recognize, according to Credit Suisse's Global Wealth Report 2015, the richest 1% of global population has about, while the lower half of the global population collectively has less than 1% of global wealth. So the 1% have global wealth and 50% have collectively less than that. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development reports that the richest 10% of the population in a first world country is probably 9 times richer than the poorest 10%. So we already have massive inequality, and he says that it might probably it's going to get worse with the fourth industrial revolution. And so he talks about, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be ultra human? If you have a crutch, if you have braces, you're still thinking of yourself as human. If you have a chip in your brain that's helping you learn faster, or you have, cybernetics in your arms to make you lift more, at what point do we reach the Thessian, non-human aspect? He does mention how, we're still dealing with the current, issue of smartphone usage, how, there was a study in, frequent interruptions by technology scatter our thoughts, our train of thought, weaken our memory, and make us more anxious in general, because at any time we could have something happen, and we wouldn't, or something could happen, we would not know about it. Also, it shows that people drastically change their behavior when they know they're being watched. They are much more compliant. He also talks about the normalization of personal devices. Not so, the first, I think, thing what we might come to mind is a pager. And he's like, hey, I need you right now. And he says that might go into things like where, like health insurance companies, we will give you a discount on your premium if you have this special health monitor device, which is almost unseeable, and it tracks your health, so we can both be on the same page. And he says once that's, universally normalized, then you could have a situation where employees that decide to opt out of wearing personal monitoring or whatever devices might then face fines and penalties for not doing it as company policy, because at some point everyone will be doing it. And he does recognize this slippery slope. And again, like that's the thing and the tone throughout this whole book is that, if this is really Schwab, then I kind of feel bad for the way people portray him, because he takes a very neutral stance on these things. He's like, this is probably what's going to happen, and that's what it is. He's very factual. He's trying to, and his only point is that we need to help create positive narratives and help mitigate, things. So it seems on paper that he has a genuine desire to see things go well for everyone. This is funny. The principal embedded multi-tax shareholder theory, what the WEF calls now the spirit of Davos, is what he first proposed when what he first proposed when he wrote a book in 1971 and on creation of the WEF, which is to create a to destroy or disseminate, dissolve the boundaries between sectors and professions, and create a more cohesive, collaborative environment between different industries to help solve the world problems. So it's all very idealistic, all very kind of by the book, all good sounding. And this last part he talks about the 4 kinds of intelligences that we should move forward with, which are the mind, the heart, the soul, and the body. The mind being the logical, contextual, this is how things are. The heart, which is the moral imperative for people who are disadvantaged. The soul, which is innovation and inspiring new progress and new possibilities. And the body, which is how we are going to change our physical bodies and integrate it with technology, and to what extent we choose to do that. So it's a little philosophical here at the end. And finally, he's kind of wrapping up here, and he says, he quotes Voltaire, doubt is an uncomfortable condition, but certainty is a ridiculous one. So he's kind of saying, hey, I don't know what the future is going to hold, but to say that we shouldn't at least try to imagine what it would be like and try to prepare for it, is what the point of this book and this organization is. We are increasingly interconnected beings. Let us, shape a future together, and by putting people first, empowering them, and constantly reminding ourselves of all these new technologies are first and foremost tools made by people for people. And that's pretty much how he closes the book. So yeah, I mean, it is what, you know, the message in here is definitely not what the message is out there on the internet. That's all I can say. You know, not a terrible book, you know, definitely interesting. You know, there's a lot of things in here where it's like, you know, people need to work together, and it's like, you know, okay, you can skip all that part, but learning about the stats and the technologies and the context of what a revolution is and the first three revolutions, those kind of data points are actually fairly interesting, I would say. Would I read this book? Would I recommend it? Probably not. I mean, all of these kind of data points are essentially what you would find in like a TED Talk. I'm sure if you watch like a 30-minute video of Klaus Schwab talking about the new world that is coming, you can pretty much watch a 30-minute video and get kind of the gist of what he's saying here. I mean, the details are interesting, but yeah, otherwise than that, it's kind of like, it's pretty much everything he's already said already. So there's no big insight like, oh, this is going to be the new big thing. This is the inside track. I'm telling you so you can get ahead. It's like, no, it's not that at all. He's a policymaker and a rep guy. But yeah, that is the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And I hope you all have a wonderful future where you own lots of good things. Anyway, as always, guys, thank you for watching, and always keep reading.